Right. So welcome to the ICLR Social on facilitating a smoother transition to renewable energy with AI. And it gives me great pleasure to say that we are really excited that it's the first social today based on the time schedule. It's the first social, and uh, we really hope that it can help us build a stronger community who is more passionate about renewable energy and helping the world transition to renewable energy through AI. So let's get started. Our social is over 2 days, today 25th April and Wednesday 27th April, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. GMT. So just to give a bit of context on why we are really doing this social and what's the motive behind it. So if you see this graph, you can see that in 2021, the carbon emissions related to energy, they have rebounded to second highest levels in history, which is alarming. So if you look at this, the improvement which we have seen in 2020 with the pandemic and things, it got like affected again, and things have returned back to alarming levels, and it can have like dire consequences. It can be like really dangerous for the world, given how we are climbing back to record levels of carbon emissions throughout the globe with our everyday activities and whatever we are doing around the world in industry and stuff like that. So it's really important that we move together and help to reduce the carbon emissions to our best possible, for which the only way is to either to reduce the emissions, which is not practically feasible given that we need to use many of the things in our everyday activities, and second way is to switch to renewables, which is probably a easier option. So that's the aim why we are here to discuss about renewable energy and focus the social around that. So to prevent a recurrence of the second highest level of carbon emissions in history again in the near future, we need to build a system which the global economy is based on renewable energy. And according to the International Renewable Energy Agency, renewable energy will immediately and significantly help reduce carbon emissions if we can actually switch to renewables throughout the globe. And if you look at these two figures, you can see that the electricity use, it today accounts for around 20% of the total energy consumption. And by 2050, this electricity use would be like 50%. So think of stuff like electric cars and the like. So with that, there is going to be a massive exponential rise in how much energy we use and how much distribution it is towards different areas, including electricity. So it probably is the best time to start thinking about how we can do things better today so that our future is more secure and more sustainable. The promise of renewable energy. So it might be interesting to see in this slide. You would note that wind energy, particularly in the US, just to give an example, it would help account for around 48.4% of the renewable energy mixture in the US. And solar energy, same like almost wind energy, it would be the other half almost of the renewable energy mix. And globally, it is predicted that in the next couple of decades, wind and solar energy, they can help meet our energy requirements in our everyday lives throughout the world. So basically, wind and solar energy, they can be like a very powerful driving force to help transition to the renewable energy. And with that thing, just to give you a context on how much wind energy is one of the most promising source of renewable energy. So it is currently at around 700 gigawatt in 2020, and it is going to rise massively. Like the amount of wind energy which is deployed throughout the world, it's going to rise massively in the coming years. So with that aspiration, with that goal, and because a wind energy sector, it has data which is more easily applicable to the AI domain in comparison to some other renewable energy sources at present. So our presentation, our social would initially focus more on the renewable side of things with the wind perspective, but definitely it can also be applicable to other areas of the renewable energy like solar and geothermal and heat energy and so on. So uh, let me say that we are talking about transitioning to renewable energy. We are talking about helping build a more sustainable future. But in fact, the thing is that it's not that easy as just like based on the transition, it's not that easy because energy systems like wind turbines, they are complex engineering systems and they regularly suffer from operational inconsistencies and failures. So if you look at this figure on the left hand side, you would see that this is a power curve of a wind turbine, which shows you how much power is generated at different wind speeds. And the red dots you would see, they signify inconsistencies, failures, and faults in the wind turbine. So you can see that we do have data, we do have labeled historical faults which have occurred in our wind turbine, and with that aspect this failures, these inconsistencies, they lead to really high O&M costs for the wind turbine operators. They lead to downtimes. You would expect that the turbine is going to generate power at a full potential, but in fact due to these failures it doesn't. So these are some key major problems which are really a highlight of why we need to uh, work on transitioning to renewables before we actually can imagine a future which is based majority of our future is based on renewables. So before that we need to work on it. And how do we work on it? It's like we do have data from wind turbines. They are engineering systems which have multiple sensors and they record data from things as subtle as environmental conditions, like what is the wind speed outside, what's the wind direction, and so on, to more low level details like the rotor speed of the turbines, the gearbox temperature, and so on. So we do have data. So but the problem is that there is a lack of awareness, or it's not really openly shared due to commercial sensitivity of such information, which makes us see less research in AI for renewables. So if you look at this figure on the right hand side, you would see that what's the number of articles which we have seen in applying AI for operations and maintenance of a renewable energy system like wind energy. So you would see that how many articles have we seen over the years? Around 100, maximum around a few hundreds. So what does that mean in comparison to the number of papers we see in AI applicable to other domains? Like at big conferences in AI, we generally see like thousands of papers over a couple of years. If you total that over maybe a decade, you would see at least 1,000 papers. And but the problem is that with uh, wind energy, with renewables, we do not see that much because maybe either it is due to the lack of data which is openly available in this domain, and second reason might be that the data which is available is there, but people have lack of awareness in how they can really use this data to develop benefits to the renewables community, and how it can really create like sustainable values for the uh, industry in general and for the renewables community in specific. So with that goal, our goal is to make the community more aware about where they can find data, where they can work on which sort of problems in this domain, and how we can together work on applying AI to renewables and uh, help make the future brighter in this area. So speaking about why we see AI and how it has evolved in the wind energy domain, you would see things as simple as simple conventional machine learning algorithms, to you would see more complex things like neural networks and even like deep learners. They have been used in the wind industry. And for tasks which range for classification problems, regression problems, to optimization of like turbines and their placements, in what location turbine should be placed to generate like optimal power. and so on. So you would see that different sorts of models have been used, right from neural networks to like genetic algorithms, and we have even things like SVMs, which are like more conventional models. So it has seen a wide variety of mix of different sort of algorithms, different sort of models and things like that. But which gives us an idea that AI is and can be applied to the wind energy domain. But we need to work more on having more data available to us, and we need to make informed decisions on how we can really leverage AI to the best potential in this domain. So now, based on the previous slides, as we now know that AI is being used with different angles in the renewables domain, the goal of this social is to spread the word. We need to uh, help build a stronger community if we really want to achieve an impact in this area, right? So that's the main goal of this social. And with that aspiration, our aim is to use AI for improved availability and reliability of renewable energy sources. So besides accomplishing the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, we hope that this social can help bring together people who are like-minded, who are passionate about sustainability, or who are passionate about AI. And together, when like brilliant minds with different perspectives, diverse angles meet, it can surely help us achieve this goal in the near future. So what's the plan of the show social? Today, we are at day 1, 25th April. And after this introduction, we are going to dive straight into the panel discussion, wherein we have some wonderful experts who have joined us today to share their views on AI and renewables and sustainability in general. And then with that, we would have some time for the audience to also ask questions to the panelists in the end. And today I am joined by my colleague, Nina, who is leading the Big Data Analytics Research Group at the University of Hull. And there we perform a lot of research in sustainability and particularly in the renewables domain. And I would like to invite Nina, and if you would like to say a few words.
Hi, Georgette. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, I think you've been very comprehensive already on why, on the background of the topic and why it is important. So I'll probably not say much more about that, but maybe sort of why us? So why did we feel that we were the right kind of research group to organize that? As you've already said, we're mostly working on offshore wind, but many of the techniques that we apply there, or that we're trying to pitch, are not exclusively applicable to that domain, of course. So I suppose overall, as a research group, we started to work on that domain, on offshore wind, more intensively about 5 years ago. I think that probably started with your PhD, actually, Georgette. So we started to work on operations and maintenance, initially trying to get AI into this for fault prediction and diagnosis and all of that. And I guess one of the things that we've tried to achieve is to combine cutting edge machine learning, deep learning methods with the sort of applications that are both curiosity driven in some way, but also really industry informed. Sort of trying to work with industry and being quite applied in that regard, in achieving fast impact as well as good on new methods. Yeah, we continue to work on operations and maintenance. We're also working a bit on structural health monitoring, which again, I think has given us a new dimension where we're not just doing deep learning from big data, but also looking at how we can get model-based approaches to be integrated in that. So combining physical modeling of the conditions, environmental and other engineering conditions that we can see, and then just using deep learning maybe to fill out the space of that we don't understand well, because there's always this this data sparsity issue with that domain, obviously, because there are so many things that can happen that we can't measure. So we need something that's not just, either we need really efficient methods, or we need something that tells us something else about the domain that maybe machine learning can't. So that's our research. As a university, we're quite well placed to do that kind of research regionally. So we're part of the Humber Advanced Cluster. So it's just for those who are not from the UK. It's we're located right next to a big set of wind farms. Really, we have the ambition to be the biggest wind farm globally. So that's something that we're working on. Not just us, but sort of as a region. So that's our ambition. We've been singled out in the government's recent green revolution policy document as an example to follow in terms of the way we integrate academic research and the working with the local industry, with non-governmental organizations and the public sector. So that was quite nice, and hopefully will put us on the map. And yeah, I guess that sort of, I think, answers the question on why we thought we should organize this event. So thank you everyone for coming. I'll pass back to you, Georgia. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. Right. So yeah, I think let's get the ball rolling for the first day and introduce our wonderful experts who have joined us today. So the panel discussion, we have 5 experts from different areas in sustainability as well as AI, and we are privileged to be joined by them today. And our discussion would focus around 5 questions based on which we hope to cover a comprehensive view of sustainability and AI, and why we need to apply AI in the renewable sector, and what are the challenges which the sector really faces at present, and how we can tackle those basically. And because the social is of around 2 hours, so we would request the panelists that let us keep our views in around 3.5 minutes for each question for each panelist. And basically the panelists would share their views based on their significant experience and expertise in AI and sustainability, and they have seen a lot of personal based on their personal experience, they have seen a lot of ways in which sustainable development can be achieved, needs to be achieved, and yeah, which can be through renewables, which can be through other areas as well. But yeah, definitely, because renewable energy is something which is still facing a lack of as much research as we see in other domains. We hope that this panel discussion would be really interesting to all of us. And yeah, so I would give a brief intro about the panelists, and we can, if you are interested, you can have a look at our website, AI4Renewables.org, for more information. So firstly, I would like to introduce Natalia, who is with us today. Natalia is a CTO in Deep Planet and a lecturer in Queen Mary University, London. She has a background in both academic and industrial research. Over the last 10 years, she has been working widely in the field of deep learning for image and video processing. Her work has been commended for successfully meeting challenges for global research community in these areas, and her research being published in top machine learning venues. Her research focuses on applications of machine learning for pursuing sustainable development goals. Natalia, we are pleased to have you with us today. Would you like to say hi to the audience?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Jojit and Nina, for having me today. It's a great pleasure and honor to be presenting here. Looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Nina, would you like to introduce Climb?
Yes, will do. Yes, so Clem has spent his entire career in the energy industry, so he's really good for this task today, with a particular focus on making complex science useful and accessible for those working in renewable energy. So again, really important. He has significant experience in installations and operations and maintenance of offshore wind farms, focusing on creating decision support tools using simulation-based optimization. He's also worked with applying Gaussian processes to the reconstruction of wind fields from LiDAR data. And at present, he is located at Vattenfall in the Netherlands. I was just in the Netherlands last week, so that's nice. Leading a team which nurtures a data-driven decision-making culture in their offshore wind business. Thank you very much. And yeah, I'm pleased to have you here.
Likewise, thanks very much for inviting me, and also looking forward to the discussions.
Thank you.
So next, we would like to introduce Shruti with us today. Shruti is a senior data scientist who is really passionate about applying data science and AI to accelerate the achievement of sustainable development goals. She has widely used causal modeling and forecasting techniques before, and is strongly interested in corporate sector and in understanding how they can help reason better with environmental, social, and governance goals. She has a demonstrated experience in management as well as academia and has held positions in both the consumer and consultancy sectors. She is really passionate about diversity and inclusion, which is really important in today's time, particularly in the STEM discipline in AI, which we are seeing today. And she has been involved in technical women's activities networks, including in IEEE and Women in Machine Learning, whom we also see at ICLR later this year. So yeah, welcome, Shruti. It's really nice to have you with us.
Thank you so much. It's my honor to be here. Thanks for inviting.
All right, shall I go next?
Yeah, sure.
Right, so next is, I'll introduce Alexandra. She has an academic background in archaeology and human rights, so also looking at a similar perspective as Shruti perhaps in that regard. She's worked internationally on a number of different projects to ensure access to rights for minorities. And she is now a chairperson of the United Nations Association at Malmö, as well as working as a sustainability consultant at Exceed, both in Sweden. She is passionate about sustainability, empowerment, and holistic thinking, and also works on embedding these values as keys to success. So again, Alexandra, we're very pleased to have you here. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Nice. So let's move on to last but not the least, our panelist Ravi, who is with us today. Ravi is currently a lecturer in instrumentation and AI at Cranfield University in the UK. Prior to that, he has held various academic posts. And in his professional career, he has worked on a number of research areas and received various awards and fellowships for the same. Ravi has published various papers in highly reputed journals and has presented his research at multiple international conferences in these areas. Particularly, Ravi's research on predictive maintenance and condition monitoring for wind turbines with AI and data science, it has received significant interest in the wind energy sector, which is really along the lines of the AI4Renewables, which we are doing today. So Ravi, it's wonderful to have you here with us today. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Georgette, and thank you for inviting me. And I'm also looking forward for this particular event. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, I think let's get started with the panel discussion. So we can start with 5 questions. Some of them are directed to all of the panelists, while some of them are split between like different groups of panelists based on their specific interest and experience in AI or sustainability. So based on that, we have a couple of questions. And yeah, I would like to request Nina, if you can share the first question with them, please.
Okay. Yeah, I'll share the first question. Let me see. We're just reading it, right? We're not showing it.
Yeah, we are just reading
okay.
it.
Okay, yeah, good. Okay, so the first question really picks up on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, particularly 7 and 13. So 7 on affordable and clean energy, and 13 on climate action. And I guess it's not so much a question as an observation. So both of these are very important. So we're going to ask, what are your views on the importance of the transition to low carbon energy sources? Taking these goals into account, do you think it's doable? Do you think it is important? And that's, yeah, it's a question to all. So I don't know, you can self-nominate to start if you wish.
I don't mind going if everyone else is silent. So okay. So I mean, it's a bit of a softball question to start, isn't it? I mean, the man-made climate change and the sort of global energy transition is probably the biggest challenge and shift that we are facing in our generation, I would say. Particularly for those of us born in the 80s and 90s, we're already seeing massive changes from how of climate, but also social and economic circumstances from what we grew up with when we were children, I'd say. So actually, this gave me the opportunity to reread the Sustainable Development Goals, which is always a good thing to do every year or so. I got three main things out of them. The first is providing the world's population with equal, at least access to modern energy, a modern energy system. The second one is making more and more of that final energy consumption based on electricity. Currently, it's about 20%, which is nowhere near high enough to my mind. And the third one is around adaptation and mitigation of climate change. And I think together, these things imply an absolutely massive shift in infrastructure, capital, and technology globally. And the question is, how do we actually achieve that? And you've seen even with sort of Paris goals that maybe the sort of promised funding is sometimes difficult to access and maybe not coordinated in the way that it should be. And I'd say together with sort of access to clean drinking water, these two things are going to be the major cause for conflicts and in the future and now. So we absolutely have to find solutions to cope with the disparity in natural resources we see across the world and to the differential impacts of climate change on different countries and different parts. Yeah, we have to do that while balancing what was always been called the energy trilemma. I think when I joined 15 years ago in the energy industry, we were talking about it, and it's still a thing. So we've got cost, security, which implies that you can't just have one person creating energy and then shifting it around the world. And of course, the sustainability impact. And I think now we're a lot more sophisticated about what we mean by sustainability. And we look around through life costs, honestly about subsidy levels. For instance, fossil fuels are actually subsidized less than renewables in Europe in the last couple of years, but that's not always been the case. So we really have to think about these things holistically. But yeah, huge challenge, very important.
Thank you. Does anybody want to pick up on this?
Yeah, I will go ahead with that one. I mostly agree with what the client is saying about the importance of renewable energy, especially in achieving this climate change and affordable clean energy resources. I hope everyone would agree that energy is now basically the driving force for any country's economical development. Right, and I was looking just before this meeting. I got some data which is not that the new one, but it's just a 2016 data, and I found that only the 39% of the people across the globe is having clean energy, and they are able to use this clean energy. That is, which is very shameful for as a global citizen, I would say. And one of the challenges, many challenges are there. For example, one of the advantage that we have when we adopt the renewable energy, it serves the three purposes. Sorry. One, it provides you the clean source, so it will not have an environmental impact. But we need to think about that, even though it's producing a clean energy, but for example, installing a wind energy itself is not it's not free from the pollution. So we need to make a change that even though it's producing a clean energy, but it's not a clean energy source that is making while developing. Second thing is that if you have a renewable energy, then it will support a very new opportunities for the new generation, especially specifically generating some kind of a green resilient economy, which basically focus on supporting or pushing the renewable areas. So I think in that way we can push more towards the climate change and whatever the goals we have under the United Nations. And third one, I would say it's basically the clean energy is basically help us to reduce the emission. It will not say that it will reduce 100%, but it will help us relatively, it will reduce the carbon emissions, and ultimately it basically help us to minimize the climate impact change. And this is more than important, especially what we have gone through in the recent 2 years, COVID pandemic. You can see what happened in that situation. And because of this, clean energy, for example, I'm talking about the wind energy, the installation goes stopped. They're not able to invest too much on the installation, and so many economics breakdown happen. So this is further more important after this COVID pandemic to think about these things. So we can divide our objectives maybe into two parts, like a short term, medium term, and the long term. something like that, I would say. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Yeah, very, very interesting thoughts. Who wants to go next?
I'm happy to go next.
Super, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I agree with previous speakers. It's very good points. So it's really difficult to add something to that. So I would add on, like, say, my areas of expertise, and I work on applying actually AI to climate change mitigation adaptation. So first, for those who has joined us but don't know what is mitigation and adaptation are. So mitigation is reducing emissions now, and adaptation is preparing for unavoidable consequences of climate change and trying to live with these consequences. Yeah, and when we speak about renewable energy, and we need to understand that like renewable energy can come from can contribute to multiple sources. So when we mitigate greenhouse emissions, we are talking about electricity systems, transportations, buildings, industry, and even land use. And for example, climate change mitigation and adaptation require planning, resilience to disasters and disaster management, understanding climate and extreme events. So it's very multifaceted issues, and I think that it's underdeveloped currently. There are multiple problems that we are currently dealing with. So currently I'm speaking from both the face of researchers in academia and people working in the industry, because I have both startup and I'm a lecturer in a university. So the challenges for different sectors are different when we're trying to switch to AI, and trying to apply AI for sustainable goals. For example, in academia, we have a lot of problems with access to the data. So we do research on the problems that exist there, and we don't have this access that will enable us to actually build and apply the models which will be useful for practitioners and industry. And on the other hand, industry is preoccupied with operations and doesn't have capacity to do research. And the inability of two sectors to collaborate is very, very difficult for us actually to actively develop this field. So there is a lot of open agreements between academia and industry and trying to sharing the data. So these are all great initiatives. Unfortunately, they're not very widespread. Also, they're different in terms of different geographies. So in different, so in UK, we have excellent access to data and facilities to do research and computational capacities. Well, in third world countries, who need actually clean energy the most, this research is very limited, both in terms of possible collaborations and access to data and access to the computational resources. So it's capabilities to do research are unfairly distributed, and it doesn't do any good to developing the whole field. Yeah, so I can be speaking for a very long time, but that's my opinion, and that's a few words about the challenges I see here in this industry. But I think this is the most important problem that exists in our society now, and we really need to collaborate to make it happen. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with that. It's always nice to see we're not the only ones who have these issues with industry collaboration. It's nice on the one hand, but there are these issues. Thank you very much. Who wants to? I can see Shruti on my screen, so just randomly, do you want to go next?
Yeah, thanks, Nina and Natalia. I do agree. The role of AI is integral in addressing, helping us adapt, detect and respond to climate change and help in decarbonization efforts. And of course, it is necessary to address climate emergency and ensure the successful net zero journey. And but of course, AI is not the sole solution. We need a coordination, for example, from governments, from private sector, and from academia to progress in this journey. And we see that there are some projects as like net zero cities in EU. They are progressing in this domain and setting up very ambitious targets to cut down the emissions and reaching the climate neutrality by 2050. So we see that there are many countries and cities which are partnering on this initiative and making sure that there is an open data available with smart cities. And another point is like this kind of data can also promote social innovation and maybe help in decision making. However, there is a downside to it when you make a lot of data available to optimize the infrastructure, traffic, or air quality, or any climate change related problems for the city. It can also be a topic of debate whether there should be an open data collaboration or not, and how AI is the sole solution to this problem, or whether we should take any more further efforts.
Yes, I agree. Thank you very much. Also agree very much with the policy thing. Sorry about that. That's how we feel about that. Alexandra, do you want to go next?
Yes, of course. So really, I would just like to echo the previous speakers, and obviously to make the global transition to low carbon energy sources is of massive importance, not only to achieve the global goals, but also for the future of our planet. We can't have fossil fuels account for almost 85% of the total primary energy consumption as it is today. It's not sustainable, as also with the increasing demand for energy, we cannot keep polluting and destroying the world in order to meet those demands. So I would say the transition do have to be quick, but we have to make sure that it's inclusive as well as a global movement, not leaving any peoples or nations behind. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think we had some really interesting points, both sort of from an industry standpoint, from an academia standpoint, as well as looking at politics and public, the role of the public sector, non-governmental organizations. So I think it becomes clear that it's sort of everybody's problem to look into and solve, not just AI. Georgie, do you want to go with the next question?
Sure. Thank you, Nina, and thank you, everyone. So as we were discussing the challenges and opportunities and areas like that, so let's come to the challenges which are currently faced by the renewables industry. So some we already discussed in the slides before, like high operations and maintenance costs, unexpected downtimes of renewable energy sources, and intermittent power production. And there are some things which are more like socially and ethically related, like social acceptance challenges. So for example, some people are concerned about the visual impact of wind turbines on landscape. Some people are concerned about the initial costs which are there for setting up, for example, solar farms. There is concern in some parts of the society over threat to wildlife from collisions, for example, from wind turbine blades. So there are multiple angles and multiple aspects which different segments of the society are concerned about. So with that thing, I would like to ask to our panelists that, in your opinion, which is the most pressing challenge that currently limits wider adoption of renewable energy globally? And it could be from within these challenges which we have described, or it could be outside of that scope as well. So yeah, it's to all panelists. So yeah, if you would like to go if you would like to take that question, please.
I'm happy to start.
Yes.
So thanks, Rajit. You mentioned that there are a lot of problems that we can refer to as important. And I do believe that, for example, capital costs in infrastructure are extremely, extremely important. And there is a big problem, but this is not a problem that is impossible to solve. Another big problem that I want to emphasize is siting and transmission, where we place the wind turbines or solar panel, how we transmit and store the energy. And of course, one of the biggest issues is political influence and power imbalance in this industry. So there is a lot of support to the fossil fuels production and usage. So I would say they're equally important, maybe towards the imbalance, a little bit towards the political influence. However, I want to emphasize the problem of social acceptance of the renewable sources. So I've been involved in research about the wind turbines, and it's interesting that to be socially accepted, the sources of renewable energy needs to be better and cleaner in minds of people than the rest of the sources. And it's a big problem because people expect them to be 100% clean with zero consequences and zero negative impacts. So even tiny problems, for example, like problem with landscape, cause a lot of damage to how these renewable sources of energy are implemented, and it causes public backlashes. We have also found that a lot of backlash is caused by the fact that renewable energy sources use non-renewable energy for operations. And it also can be considered as negative in the public. Also, what have a small impact to particular area can be considered. This is always considered. So there is a lot of work needs to be done with the public opinion and with educating people. So, for example, the reliability concerns and also reliability misconceptions, they're very widespread, and we need to educate general populations as researchers and as industry specialists of what can be done to mitigate these negative consequences, or, for example, just compare these negative consequences, realistic negative problems of renewable energy to those of the alternative sources, for example, usage of fossil fuels. So usage of fossil fuels in minds of people is so bad by definition that it doesn't cause additional damage for somehow to use it, since we're already using it. But switching to renewables is more damaging. So these are social problems that needs to be addressed, and I believe as soon as possible, through education and through disseminating more information about actually the benefits of renewables, about the reliability, about benefits versus negative consequences. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Natalia. Yeah, I completely agree with the views, and yeah, I mean, like the education and knowledge sharing, it's definitely important. And I think that one of the goals of the social is that we can educate and share knowledge to the audience and to people around the world, that and clear up some misconceptions which exist on renewables. And yeah, hopefully we can get this more socially acceptable. Yeah, so Shruti, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I would like to continue from the Natalia's point, the challenges to wind energy, perhaps only from a personal point of view, not representing any other industry point of view or any of Deloitte's views. So according to me, the major three challenges to the adoption of, to the renewable energy adoption is, first is cost. As we see the years pass, the cost is getting reduced, the cost of installation of facilities of solar and wind farms. But also we see second is the transmission, because wind farms are, good wind sites are often located, I guess, at remote location far from the cities, and it's not a very much profitable use of the land. So I would say that wind power must still compete with the conventional generation resources on a cost basis. Uh, I think so. And I think most of this operation and maintenance cost of the wind farms is still paid by the insurance companies. If I'm wrong, please correct me here. But yeah, there are some costs implications that are there, and along with some barriers to entry to the market, and then societal adoption, and then governmental regulations in the market.
Right. Thank you. Very interesting. And yeah, I mean, the cost aspects and profitability, it's definitely one of the big hurdles for the industry in always, because if you are running a business, everyone wants that to be profitable. And I completely agree with your views. I think Climb would be able to better tell about the insurance companies and that aspect. So maybe you want to go next, Climb?
Yeah, I can quickly add. I would say that obviously insurance companies don't pay our O&M costs, if only they did. I think there's some issues that we have. So we've had a lot of cable failures in offshore wind farms, for example, and of course those things are insured, but that's not the majority of the O&M cost. That's special events. So but in general on O&M costs, I would say that O&M costs are an aggregate result. I wouldn't say it's a problem in itself that things cost money to maintain. I think we have to go a couple of levels deeper than that and really work out what the problems are. And in general, particularly if you look at offshore wind, which is my sort of area, I guess, we send people offshore to do work. It's difficult, dangerous, dirty work, and it costs money. And the more we can do remotely, and the more that automation and robotics can help us with that, in principle, the better. In principle. But of course, if you design a robot that fails more often than the turbine, then you've just replaced one problem with another one. So we have to have a sensible solution. Otherwise, in answer to the question, I think Natalia touched on pretty much everything I was going to say. I was just going to say the GWEC Global Wind Energy Council report is a pretty good read if you're interested in the key challenges for wind energy. And for me, apart from the grid availability permitting that you mentioned, I'd probably touch a little bit more on supply chain in general. So raw materials costs, I mean, they're volatile anyway, and we've seen them really go up this year. But I'm also thinking if we're looking at the global move to renewables, there's a lot of local industry requirements if we're really serious about making it a global industry. And local ability to design, procure, manufacture, install, and operate these plants, say it's wind turbines, requires a lot of investment by local companies, but also maybe different solutions are more appropriate around the world. So we use steel for a lot of stuff, but maybe we could use wood or concrete. Maybe they're more appropriate solutions in certain places, although don't get me started on the embodied energy in concrete. But there's lots of different solutions, and we have a very Europe-centric wind farm industry at the moment. Obviously, there's an emerging industry in China. It's probably bigger than the European one, but there's not much gap between them. And you really need to build up local supply chains, local knowledge, and maybe even local designs to really sort of accelerate the transition.
Right, thank you. Yeah, I think it was really insightful to get that perspective on offshore wind, and particularly things like you mentioned that it's currently Europe-centric, and then there comes this potential for some parts of the world to also accelerate in this area. But yeah, it definitely comes at the cost of knowledge sharing, which is required. There is things which has to be done, which we still need to do. So yeah, I really appreciate your point about the Europe-centric nature of this industry. Hopefully it expands to more parts of the world where there is potential in the future. So anyone would like to go next?
Yeah, I will go.
Sure.
It's okay. So, well, I agree with most of the what my fellow panelists said about the challenges associated with the renewable energy, more importantly with the wind energy. But I would also like to say, if based on my limited experience in working with the wind energy, I would say that three are the main challenges associated with the wind energy that basically not helping the wind energy to grow as it's supposed to be at that rate. One is the basically high initial cost. That is a more important thing. For example, nobody the installation is, or in the wind turbine installation is very costly, costly things, and nobody want to invest that much of money until unless they get some kind of a warranty. So high initial cost is basically one of the main reason that basically not helping other country which has a potential to install the wind turbines. For example, in India, they're still searching, finding a way how they can reduce the wind energy. They have a southern part of India where they have installed the wind turbines, but these are the onshore, not the offshore. They don't have that kind of a facility. Second, I think is basically the technology transfer. I think if we really want to if we really want to fight against the climate change, we need to work as one. We should not give us some kind of IP restriction to the other country who is not yet been developed, but they want to use it. For example, countries such as China and India are the biggest polluter in terms of the pollution, but they don't have a technology or resources, right? So how they are going to deal with that one? And the country, those who own those technology, they don't want to transfer it. So that is a technological transfer issue is there. And third one, I would say, is basically to do with the well, it's basically to do with the industry. I think I would say they basically afraid to take the risk. They don't want, for example, if you want to develop some kind of a machine learning technologies, and you can claim that okay, this my technology will do the self repairing of the component. You don't need to send a person, and you test it with only 5 or 6 turbines data sets. But if they want to take those results, those models or those knowledge to their whole wind operation, and if they fail that your algorithm that you propose, then it will cost a lot to the company, and that basically afraid them to not to take a risk. That is another challenge that I think I had faced with the industry. They say many things that okay, this will be pushed, but the rate at which they are supposed to take a risk, whatever the things we are developing, is not that significant it's supposed to be. That's my limited experience, I would say, while working with the Romeo project and the Awesome project. Yeah.
Thank you, Ravi. Yeah, it's really interesting, the point about the algorithms not being the like perfect, always perfect, which is in every area of AI, I think. And that's, I think, one of the reasons it touches upon is that why wind farm operators are reluctant to use AI in practice. Like we see so many models being developed in academic labs, but actually how many are being used in the industry? I think we really don't know the exact number. It's very little, or maybe it's not revealed that much. So yeah, I think that's one of the issues that we need to work together, like domain experts in wind energy, they need to come together with AI specialists, and together they can build like the optimal models for real world use. So yeah, very interesting. Thank you. Yeah, then I think Alexandra, you would like to share your views, please?
I would. Thank you so much. And definitely agree with previous speakers. There's so many layers, I think, to the challenges that we face in the transition. And first of all, I would say it's one of the bigger ones are the lack of governmental policies as well as support for the transition. It's like without governmental policies as well as both financial and moral support in the transition, it will be slow or non-existent. We cannot suppose that companies will take responsibility. It has to be a global movement, and it has to be systematic with sharing resources, that nobody is left behind. I mean, as a consultant working for companies, I've seen there is such a will to move forward, but there is still this uncertainty and lack of knowledge what will happen in the future. So if there would be governmental policies and support, companies would have it easier moving forward and actually making a change. And also citizens should not be put with that pressure in making the transition. And government, as Natalia said, with education, should definitely provide that so people can make an informed choice as well. But secondly, I also would say the high cost of the technology, both in financial terms, but also resource-wise, together with the lack of infrastructure in certain countries or in other nations. I mean, especially in the low to middle income nations. And maybe even today we haven't come as far to perfect the technology to make it actually long-term sustainable. If we look at solar energy, it does have low cost and maintenance, but it is expensive to store the energy, as well as in the production there is this toxic element of the materials that are being used. So how can we make sure that the technology we use moving forward is actually sustainable in the long term as well? So there's a lot of different layers, I would say. You can dig even deeper, but I think those, if we can tackle those, we can make the first move and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra. Yeah, I think very, very insightful and interesting views on about the aspects which are currently hidden from the people. Like there are so many aspects which come out on the top, but there are some deeper layers, as you mentioned, which need to be brought out to the audience, to the people, to the by the government. I think government, as you say, has a really important role to play so that people are not pressurized to switch to such energy sources, but they first understand that what's the potential impact going to be. So I think there is some work needed by governments around the world to work on like knowledge transfer, education, training, as well as helping make their citizens of the future more informed about technologies of the future and their potential. So thank you everyone for your views. And we come to, I think, the third question. Nina, would you like to share it? I think it has two parts to it.
Yes, I can do. So I'm looking at the first part. So this one is looking a bit at, I don't know, it's smart cities or communities, but what are your views on AI shaping a sustainable future for cities and communities, and then helping us to get to net zero in this way? I think this is a question mostly for Natalia, Alexandra, and Shruti. So I don't know, I could nominate Alexandra. Do you want to start? Because you've gone last. That's always a bit of an unthankful kind of position.
Well, absolutely, and I think it's a very interesting concept, and I think the AI definitely has the potential to help us reach net zero, but I think there are many obstacles as well. With bringing down maintenance costs, for example, we could place people out of work, and with that comes a great lack of support as well as trust, I think, amongst people for the technology, especially like in the energy sector, maybe, but also like this movement of change maybe is not always that popular. We've seen through the times, but I think we need to consider then that we need to establish a basis of trust and open communication. This is what we want to achieve, and this is the goal with using AI, not just in the energy sector, but to the people in general. And I also think that investments have to be made further to develop the AI technology, so it is actually suitable for sustainable energy production and then not just an idea. But then thirdly, with AI technology being quite expensive, both in maybe resources and monetary wise, we have to be aware that this can create a divide between countries, and like how to consider that, so that we really make sure that we don't leave anyone behind and the process is inclusive, so for everyone.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you very much. Yeah, I think that's a really important point on the inclusivity, also picking up on earlier points. Shall I don't know, Natalia, Shruti, who wants to go next?
I'm happy to go.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Alexandra. I totally agree with you. I want to a little bit emphasize the aspects of AI that can actually contribute to shaping sustainable future for cities and communities. Yeah, so from a machine learning perspective, I not completely still accept the term AI. I'm working in machine learning for the last 20 years, and it's very recently became AI. So I will be switching if you don't mind. So machine learning has been recognized extremely powerful in many areas, and it's growing in importance. Specifically, I think that there were breakthroughs in pharma, in computer vision and natural language processing. So we see the power of what AI can do. Similar models can be applied to sustainable development goals. And when it comes to urban development for the energy consumption by buildings, for example, it's extremely important. It can be applied to cities, to separate buildings. It can forecast demand. It can forecast exact usage, help to eliminate waste in terms of electricity, in terms of heat consumption, same to the cooling. So this is very powerful. It can significantly reduce this consumption. So also it can affect the patterns of our behavior by forecasting, for example, transportation systems within the cities. It can massively improve agricultural land usage. If we look at the land in terms of not only the crops we're growing, but also fertilizers we're producing, water that we're using for agriculture. So all these are very important. Like, they're not very, very significant per se, but altogether it makes a huge impact. And I believe AI can make this happen really quickly. That, of course, a lot needs to be done. So in terms of model development themselves, so I don't believe that off-the-shelf model developed in academia can be straightforwardly reused in the industry. There's also this calibration and adaptation to real data. And this is the problem that I mentioned before, the gap between those who develop these models and those who actually use these models, and the difficulty and interaction between this. So once we smooth these problems, and I do believe that that can be improved if we really want to do this, there is a huge potential. I believe that waste can be eliminated, and there's some research shows that waste in electricity consumption can be eliminated like down to 30%, for example, if we look at the urban development. Similar to agriculture, waste can be eliminated even more, up to 60% of the resources are wasted in terms of crops, in terms of resources such as water, in terms of fertilizers and nutrients production as well. However, all this said, AI is not a silver bullet. AI itself cannot do anything unless we put in place really good policies and practices supported willingly by all members of the community, by government who is willing to set these sustainable practices, by citizens who are well informed and educated on what they can use and how they can use, by everything, literally including infrastructure maintenance people who are willing to help people to switch to better sources of electricity to their homes. So there is a very complex problem and needs a collaborative solution.
Thank you very much. Yes. Shruti, do you want to add to this?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Natalia. So to continue with that, so why should we consider cities? So cities are, I go from, Natalia mentioned AI perspective, I'll go from SDG perspective. So SDG 11 is smart cities, and 70% of the global emissions are contributed by the cities. And also 60% of the world population, they live in the cities. That is why it is important for, to kick off projects on smart cities and net zero cities to support frameworks such as EU Green Deal. So if any of you who don't know what European Green Deal is, it is basically a framework that says that that commits to ensure no net zero emissions by 2015, and it makes sure that no person or no city is left behind in that commitment. So we do see, I mean, it's going to be going to be a lifeline after, let's say, post pandemic world, and we see more and more initiatives coming in the future. And I do agree with Natalia that yes, AI can do solve certain infrastructure problems in the cities. It would definitely be a very efficient solution to optimize certain problems related to waste management or traffic management or air quality, etc. And again, it's not a silver bullet. It is, but definitely very important to have AI, and it has already proven, AI solutions have already proven their worth in this domain.
Thank you. George, I think your question sort of follows on with this, right? It's sort of...
Yeah, sure. So as we discuss some of the sustainability and other aspects, the question is more directed towards the industry aspects. It's for Climb and Ravi. So what is your opinion on the role which AI can play in helping the industry? For example, wind farm operators, from an industrial perspective, like, for example, capturing more energy, reducing maintenance costs, ensuring more profits in operations, and so on. So either of you want to go first, Ravi or Climb?
Yeah, I will go. I think the AI can play a very important role, especially the role of AI is basically on improving a decision support, especially in the wind energy. So you can assume, for example, the decision support system, then after you have a predictive maintenance. So I'm giving you a very hypothetical situation to explain you the what I mean to say is, for example, you have a offshore wind located in a very any harsh environmental condition, right? And just assume that you had a gearbox failure, and and then in addition to that you have a very bad weather condition. Now what is the situation a wind operator can do? He can send a person to repair it, otherwise you will have it will affect your wind power productions, right? If you send the person, then his life will be dangerous, is at risk because of the weather conditions. So what the AI can do is basically to find a solution whether that repairing or that condition or the repairing can be avoided for a certain period of time. So, and can it continue to produce a wind energy for a certain period of time until unless the weather gets settled. So this is where the AI comes. So what I mean to say is that remote monitoring, or what I call it a self-repairing mechanism through the AI system. If you can't stop the damage, can you make it minimum so that it will not affect the person's life as well as what you call the components catastrophic failure. So that is one of the application the AI can find very useful. In fact, I'm looking a way how can we finding a way applying AI basically to identify the failure which can be done remotely without sending a person. So that is something research I am looking after. So you don't need to send a person, but if you need to send a person, so you have to think about the weather condition. Then after one also you have to think about the skilled peoples. You will not find the skilled people. In the wind energy we have a routine maintenance, and then after you have a unscheduled maintenance. Routine maintenance means every month, a week, you have to send a person. Unscheduled maintenance is basically means if something happened unexpectedly, and at that time you will not find the professional people. So that finding a person at that time will charge a company more, in addition to the two other factors. So in that regard, the AI can play a very important role to minimize this cost and improve the decision making process, and also extend the life of a life warranty of the components. So this is something I am very interested in. I'm currently working on those areas. So I can say this is one of the basically the opportunity where AI can play. The only problem with that one is the data, because most of the data that we got from the industry are not, I would say 30 to 40% are useless, or then 40% you'll get a data is not mean to get a data that to test your model. So in that case, you're forced to use some kind of a synthetic data to test your model. Again, that synthetic data will not give you the clear picture of the what is a real scenario. So again, here the strong engagement with the industry is very important with regard to the data. So this is the opportunity I think is very important, especially in case of AI for the wind energy.
I completely agree. And I think everyone here who is from the AI background, they would be able to resonate with the idea you mentioned about remote decision support. I think it could be a very exciting avenue for researchers in AI to build their work on. So thank you, Ravi. Climb, would you like to continue on that?
Certainly. I think it's nice that AI is being considered a slightly broader umbrella here. For me, it's extremely broad, and it's not just machine learning on neural networks, which is often the what's being spoken around these days. So for me particularly, I mean, optimization is extremely important. Reinforcement learning has a lot of potential, and these problems are exactly as Ravi said. It's decisions making is the vast majority of operations and maintenance. And so we have to find different ways to support it. To me, the technology itself is only a small part of the problem. And you often have a situation where there's sort of technology push. But this will never work if I mean, the next question is more about transfer from academia to industry, right? But if you're looking for how can you add value, then the value has to come from the problem, the true problem in industry, or in this case in industry, right? So my recommendation is every single product that I've built or paper that I've written has always come from talking to a person. And sometimes they have a question, or they have like, oh, I would like this, but most often it's not that clear cut, and you have to sit down with them, observe how they work, talk to them about what they are, and you have to match up your knowledge of what particular techniques are capable of with the gaps and the inefficiencies you see in their job, and propose them something, and maybe take them on a journey to understand it, because a lot of people can't really visualize how their life would be different with something that's potentially completely different. So then you have to take them through steps. So I give one brief example. I was working on daily maintenance support. So I spent the last 5 years building software that now runs in various wind farms that supports people to make decisions about which work orders to do, so which jobs to do on which turbines, but also with which people, which boats, etc. And you've got to include the weather, you've got to include the revenue. There's all sorts of complexities to it that is not the subject of a 1-minute discussion. But you can't jump straight from you're doing this with paper and Excel to, and now there's an optimization algorithm solving the problem for you, so don't worry, just take the result and implement. You've got to start in steps, and you start with saying, well, okay, I'm going to start by using to predict the outcome of your solution. So your solution, you throw that in, and it will tell you these are the results, and you have to show them in a way that makes sense for them. And then you can start saying, okay, well, now we'll start proposing a few extra solutions, maybe auto-generating solutions. You can compare them against your solutions. And then final step is, okay, I'll press the button and see what it sells me. And that comes months or years later as you build the confidence. And particularly, you don't just build the confidence of your one super user, you have to build the confidence of the entire organization. So yeah, all I suggest is sit down with people, really understand the problem and see how it connects with the knowledge and experience that you have as an AI expert, and then be prepared to put in the hard yards.
Thank you, Climb. Yeah, definitely. It's a very important, I think, integral, you can say, part of this thing, because what we see these days, particularly unfortunately it happens in the AI area community, is that people have data available, for example online open source data. They might use that, they might start to write a paper about it, that we developed this algorithm and this does this and it helps to reduce O&M costs. But actually when you take that model out to the industry, we might observe that it is not that good and it doesn't really work at all for them. So it's definitely important for closer collaboration. Data only shows you half the picture, the other half you need to see through the lens of industry experts, domain experts, definitely. So resonating on that, going ahead along those lines we discussed in the past questions, I think the next question surrounds the challenges which the renewables domain is facing, particularly like the industry is reluctant to use the models, for example due to the black box nature of deep learning models. It prohibits, it restricts the industry from actually using these models, and of course due to the lack of data. So yeah, Nina, would you like to share the next question with them, please?
Yeah, I can do. Yeah, so the next question is, it picks up a bit on that trust element that I think we've heard about a few times now, and confidence. So it's about, I think you could say collaboration between AIs and humans, or should there be like any collaboration? So the question is, what role do you think humans can play in driving digital transformation towards shaping the future of renewables in the AI revolution? So for example, should AI replace humans? Is that something that we should aim for? Is AI going to assist humans? Is that a more desirable outcome? Should there be collaboration between AI and humans? So what is the most, I don't know, desirable as well as realistic outcome maybe? So that I've got the questions, that question to Alexandra, Shruti and Ravi. Does anybody want to go first?
I can start.
Yeah.
Yeah, as you also mentioned, with the lack of trust, I would say that's a big issue here. Like, what role AI should play in the future? I obviously think we should maximize the use of it to make sustainable energy the most sustainable. No matter if it places some people out of business. I mean, there's always this change throughout history, even like when old technologies become superfluous or like not needed anymore. But for that sake, we cannot stop developing and saving the resources of our planet. And so that would be my answer, that we should aim to maximize the use and make it as sustainable as possible, as well as long as we make sure that it's accessible to everyone, as I keep saying as well, because I am terrified of this, that people will be left behind. And as someone mentioned earlier, that it could be the greatest cause of conflicts if it's not divided up equally and everyone has equal access. So yeah, definitely full on feed, I would say, for
Okay.
AI.
Push it as far as we can if everybody has access, or as long as they let us. Very good. I don't know who wants to go next. Ravi, I see you on my screen.
Yeah. So yeah, I agree with what the Alexandra says about that one, but I can add some of the step that we as a human can make a push for the digitalization. As one of the is that whatever the technology we are developing, make them public, maybe through some event or something, and aware the industry, means relevant industry, that this technology can save you, means save your maintenance, improve the cost and reduce the cost, or whatever you can do, means it's basically help you to get extra money, if I have to say in that way, and it will not affect that thing. And the second thing is more about, I would say, the collaboration is more important, especially in that time, especially if you want to push the digitalization aspects, which is still, I think from last 5 to 6 years, I think the Jyotish showed us some one graph where he's showing that how many paper article is been applied, AI applied for the wind energy O&M cost, and it is, I think after 2018 the paper got increased, but it's not that sufficient. But these are just a paper, and you will find that most of these paper research are just kept it as a repository, hardly been exploited by the industry for other activities. This is something needs to be done, because you will find many solutions in those research objectives. And third thing, we have to be uh, I would say we have to be realistic about the AI, that it is not a single, I would say it's not a silver bullet to solve every problem. It has their own pro and cons. So for example, if you are going to use a deep learning methods, so it will basically going to require a lot of computational resources, high pre-processing, and indirectly you are basically generating a carbon emissions on that one by using a high computational resources. So we have to think about, or we have to strike a balance, what kind of a solutions you want that can be sustainable, like a green computing, that can be achievable and to have a very minimal effect also on your model development process. So this is something I would say the two or three things can play a very important, human can play a very important role on that one. So just because it's a buzzwords like a deep learning, we are not forced to use it. We have to start with a simple and see we'll find a more solution. For example, I mean, I found it most of the solution can be shown by a simple logistic regression kind of thing instead of going through the big things. Of course your accuracy will be deteriorated, but it's not that much that can be striking. So solution is very important, what kind of a problem you're tackling, I would say.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that's true as well. I mean, the question sort of assumes that AI could solve it all. I think it's good you're reminding us that that is not necessarily the case. So that's good.
Well, it's a case, but you don't need to start with the AI first. That's my question. You will find the solution with the simple techniques. My humble submission is that if you have some problem, try with the simple things, because AI has their own problems like dealing with a big data set and computational things. So you'll find most of the solution can be done, or you'll achieve a satisfactory result without going with a very high computationally efficient machine learning technologies.
Yes, yeah, that is the case for many problems, isn't it? You don't always have to go to the big methods. Shruti, do you want to add to this?
Yeah, sure. To continue with that, I would say that maybe it is key that we see, adoption of this energy companies to, invest time and resources into AI, and probably because of this slow adoption, we see that, certain probably collaborations or availability of data because of, I don't know, maybe a privacy issue, or it's a proprietary issue. We don't see a lot of publicly available data in this domain. And however, in the coming decade, I would say that probably we see the word that they use, data strategy, and we see more data driven companies with to have a larger goal to achieve this transformation in the future. And yeah, they and make use of full potential of what AI has to offer to the energy industry.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, really interesting points. Georgia, do you want to? I think you've got this sort of part B, don't you?
Sure. So thank you, Nina, and thank you all. So let's continue on this aspect now from an industry perspective. So because Natalia and Climb, you have both seen both sides of industry as well as research from the sustainability domain. My question to you is that what, in your opinion, are the avenues for translating the AI which we develop in academic laboratories into real world use cases in the industry? So for example, it could be like using explainable AI models, which are not black box, moving beyond applications which are very common, like power forecasting, fault prediction at a binary level, maybe that, or you are predicting a fault occurs or it's a normal operation. Like, is there some potential for more explainability, and what are the other areas the community could work on, both the AI side of things and the industry? So you would like to share your views, either of you, Natalia or Climb, first?
Shall I go first then this time? Okay. I Actually, the first point I wanted to make is that actually, if we're talking about decision making a lot in particularly O&M, and if the decision makers don't understand how to think statistically, then you've got no chance, because these models should be producing confidence levels around all of their predictions, whether it's a decision-making algorithm or whether it's a prediction algorithm. And I found that the majority of leaders and decision makers do not really ask for, let alone know how to interpret such things. And that's really the change that's required in a lot of places, is actually to get to a more sophisticated understanding of risk and how to use the uncertain outputs and models to make useful decisions, and to understand that better is fine and it doesn't need to be perfect and correct every time. So there's some sort of collaboration there between sort of industry and academia, I suspect, on these sort of training, both for current leaders but also future leaders. And I've maybe come back to Natalia's point earlier, is like a lot of the problems that she identified, I think, were basic cognitive biases that are never trained out of us at school. And you're lucky if you get to learn them later. The next one I would quickly say is about understanding the problem before proposing the solution. Like, explainable AI is very exciting technology, but I'm not convinced it actually solves many problems, at least not straight away. Just to be a little controversial, perhaps. And then my third controversial point, because I like to stir things up towards the end, is the question of what is academia for and what is industry for. And to me, in an academic environment, you have the time to focus on really understanding a tool, really building it, really explaining all the assumptions behind it, maybe extending its generality, maybe making it more efficient. And whenever I've built something, I've taken a concept from literature, whether it's, I don't know, whether it's Gaussian processes or Markov chain Monte Carlo or evolutionary computation, it doesn't matter. These tools already exist. And sometimes you need, and to apply them, you then need to adjust them, as people have said before. That doesn't work to any problem out of the box, but you need to understand them, and you need to have your textbook or your paper full of explanations of, you can use it for this, you can use it for that, you can't use it for that. In industry, we don't have time to do deep theoretical analyses of whether the tool applies to your problem. We need to have intuitive enough understanding that, based on someone else's deep thinking, that we know whether or not it's going to be applicable to a particular problem, and then we can go ahead. And so to me, that's you've got a tool. You need in the supply chain model, you need manufacturing, and then you need the people who use the tools and apply them to problems. And I worry that in the rush towards making every university department show impact, we force the people who should be building the tools to instead apply the tools. So I think a little bit more understanding of how we collaborate best together, I think that would really help to accelerate take up of AI, as you put it, or making sure that AI's tools are applicable to problems in industry.
Thank you, Klein. Yeah, very interesting views, and completely agree on the hype which is there with AI, and particularly more complex algorithms these days. You see a new algorithm which is released, and people generally, many would try to use that off the shelf and try to apply it to one of their problems and write a paper on it and publish. Unfortunately, that's the real case which we see in today's world. And yeah, definitely in industry, people are not concerned about the state of art tables, like not to rule the table with 99.9% accuracy, but you need to be sure that it actually reaches that level of accuracy and it is trustworthy. So thank you for your views. Natalia, would you like to continue on that, please?
Thank you. And thank you very much, Klein, for your thoughts. It's very interesting. I agree and disagree to some of your points, but that's a long discussion. So first, I want to touch up on a point, Georgie, that you mentioned. Yes, we really care about the performance in industry. So we really do check these tables and we try to get the model that performs the best. But what we care about more, as you have mentioned, is that you really need a working model. Like you need something that works in all the circumstances. So there is a sort of trade-off we have to choose from. And similar trade-off actually when it happens when we talk about explainable AI and say, let's call it high-performing AI. There's a little bit disconnect in research in terms of, okay, this is explainable AI and this is how explainable model works and that is how they perform. Another group of researchers work on, this is the really hardcore, best-performing AI that can do literally everything. And they rarely intersect those two sets of models. And again, when we're in the industry, the intuition is that we would prefer to use explainable models because we need to understand what's happening in our forecasting or in our operation, and it's extremely important. But at the same time, we want best performing models, and we tend to use these as well. So it's not, again, coming back to the issue of time, there is no time in industry to go deep into understanding why the models are working. And in machine learning and AI, the research is so fast-paced that many models are not explored very well. They get into in GitHub, they're being published, they're being released, but what are the pitfalls and what are the problems under these models, we will understand later in next year's publications. So it's a little bit problematic for industry to use this out-of-the-box model. So for us, from the industry perspective, we want academia to do more research, more high-quality research, more well-thought research, of course. And from the academic perspective, in many cases, this cannot be done unless we have the industry data and data available to industry. Yeah, so this is a very closed loop and cycle from which it's very difficult to escape. So I do believe that we need to work both in industry and in academia towards solving these challenges. Unfortunately, there is no one good solution for that. And obviously, we want to apply academic research in daily operations. And the downside of using state-of-the-art models is that we find out the pitfalls of these models while using them. And it's not a good option to use explainable models instead, because they're either in a slightly different domain or slightly less performing, or might be not producing exactly the same results. So it's not always possible. Unfortunately, we should do more work on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalia. Very insightful views on the nature of AI, which we see today. And completely, yeah, definitely, it's a vicious cycle, isn't it? With the industry being reluctant to share data, and academics, they generally, unfortunately, having the pressure to publish research in leading venues. So unfortunately, with that, there is no balance, which we see much balance in well thought research, as you say. So yeah, we definitely need to see more thoughtful research, more focus on the problem rather than the solution, as Climb also mentioned, for a more impactful use of AI in this domain. So with that thing, we come to the last but not the least aspect of this panel discussion. Nina, would you like to give a description of that, please?
I can do, George. I just noticed we've got 24 minutes left. Do we want to ask if there are any questions from the audience so that this doesn't go amiss?
Yeah, we can go ahead. Yeah.
I don't know. Otherwise, I'll introduce the question.
I think let's introduce the question and then ask the audience if they want to continue on that.
Okay. Yeah. So the last question picks up on this inclusivity aspect that we've discussed at various points. So obviously, developing AI models comes with high financial costs. training some contemporary AI models can lead to carbon emissions comparable to a trans-American flight. We've now learned, and it was a paper recently that has compared different models and different other activities you might engage in. So it's not that easily accessible for most of the developing world, for example. And so this can lead potentially to furthering the digital divide. So that's what we want to talk about last but not least in our discussion. And I think Georgette has the questions for that.
Yeah, so like our question was that what are your views on a future roadmap which can help ensure that no one gets left behind, as Alexandra also said quite a few times, that no one gets left behind in this AI race to apply AI in the renewables domain, while also accounting for ethical and moral concerns and inclusiveness and inclusivity. So that was the question. And yeah, we can ask the audience. We also have a question on the chat as well from Swati. So I can see the question.
I think the question is quite related to your question, actually.
Right. Swati, would you like to yeah, unmute yourself and speak out the question, please? Like what?
Hi. Yeah, hi, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. So my name is Swati. So basically, while I was listening to all the point of views from various domains, like from academia and from industry, it kind of got me thinking that maybe frugality can be an aspect that will help us achieve the sustainability goals, as someone talked about, right? The United Nations laid down some 16, or I believe there are 16 sustainability goals. So I just wanted to understand, like what are the research, like, do you believe that this can be a good area of research, like at the intersection of frugality, artificial intelligence, and renewable energies? Because as someone rightly mentioned, that AI alone is not sufficient, and we need something beyond AI. So I just want to understand what are your point of views on doing the research at the intersection of frugality, AI, and renewable energies. So yeah.
So any of our panelists want to take that question?
I think, does frugality have a special meaning, or are we just talking about energy efficiency and
So frugality, okay, so frugality can have multiple definitions, but if I have to lay it out in layman's language, it's about developing a solution in a resource constrained manner. So for example, if you have to develop a solution, you can have, anyone can develop a solution with many resources available, right? But it takes really, it takes a out of the box thinking to develop a solution in a very resource constrained manner. And since we are talking here about renewable energies, so I kind of had this thought that maybe frugality will play a big role, since of course, again, we have very less resources at our bay. So yeah, that's why I kind of wanted to understand, like, what are everyone's point of view on this particular area of research, or maybe this particular aspect of renewable energies.
May I go to George? Georgette?
Sure. Go ahead.
So I think the main application, I think the AI is basically, and I also talked about those things, is basically improving the decision-making process. When we say the decision-making process is basically using the resource at its optimized level. That's what the AI is doing here. So I think frugality is basically a dominating player here when we are applying the AI for the renewable energy. So for example, I can give you example. You have a, let's say, the wind turbine life expectancy of 25 years. What will happen after 25 years? Are you going to dump those big tower or everything to somewhere, or it will again polluted to the system? So in that way, what the AI is doing is basically how can we extend the life of the beyond the 25 years of a lifespan of a wind turbine, and at the same time making sure that that component or that system is not a wasteful. and we are not spending that much of time. So we have a concept called remaining useful life estimation. There the AI can play a very important role, which is basically nothing but a very robust accumulation or using a resource in a very wise way and not being a very wasteful, and at the same time making sure that we are not using such kind of algorithm that cost us more than the problems. So if you are solving some solution and they are saving you a, let's say, 100 pound a month, but your solution is cost you a 200 pound a month, will it be resourceful? No, nobody going to buy it. So we have to find some kind of a balance, what kind of solution we are giving, whether it's a cost effective or not. The cost effectiveness plays a very important role in the wind energy.
Okay, thank you, Dr. V.
Thank you for the question. If we have any more questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask it to the panelists.
Just maybe add one thing while we're waiting. So I agree with what Ravi just said, but I think you can think holistically about the total cost of anything, exactly as you said. So now, particularly with these largest, blockchain and NFTs was the main sort of offender, and now it's GPT-3 and things like that. But it's if we could get to the situation, as I think Ravi was alluding to, where you can use a significant proportion of the consumption of your wind farm in order to power the AI that's supposedly making it more efficient. And while that's a good topic for a sci-fi novel, I suspect that's not a world I want to live in. So I think we do have to consider this, and there are other areas of AI where this is much more considered, let's say, particularly in optimization. So so in Bayesian optimization, a sort of cost-aware optimization, that's a big topic of sort of research, and it's in general, like the energy cost of the algorithm has always been of zero consequence, and maybe we should charge charge it into the decision making of the algorithm itself somehow. And that's a particularly easy case when you're talking about decision making and optimization, because there's a cost of doing running every evaluation. But in machine learning, maybe there's another way. And it's maybe in a similar way you have sort of information criteria to choose between the complexity of the model and its effectiveness, right? You could apply some sort of other sort of efficiency criteria there, maybe.
Yeah, thank you, Klein. Definitely, we need to have some sort of metric to analyze the model beyond accuracy in terms of its trustworthiness for the industry. We need to find its things beyond accuracy, of course, like how much utility it's going to deliver, what are its USPs for the industry to actually use these models in real life. I think that's a very important point. Thank you for that. Do we have any more questions from the audience?
Yes, hi. My name is Min. I have a questions maybe to the panelists. What kind of regulation applies to AI models in the energy sector? Because there are a lot of regulators, right? You have like energy regulators, and you have so what are the hurdles to have like to put an AI model in production?
Thank you for the question. Any of the panelists want to go answer that question?
That's a great question. It really depends on what it's doing, I'd say. So this is where my knowledge is a little limited, but I mean, if it's involved in actually operating the turbines themselves, then it will come down to the cybersecurity, and it depends on the country and the size of the wind farm, because it's national energy infrastructure in the end. But otherwise, most of the uses are internal and commercial, but that's one area where I suspect if it's used in a controller for a wind turbine and so, then you need to put it through the turbine certification procedures to make sure that the turbine is still considered worthy. And this is a problem we had with controllers, actually, is that self-adapting controllers are kind of banned at the moment. or at least ones that still continue to adapt once they're live and on the wind turbine in the field. And we're working with people like DNV, to sort of the certification agencies to see how it's possible. But at the moment, it's very much needed that it has completely predictable behavior under certain conditions when in the field. So that's another area where there is sort of some sort of regulatory, I guess you could call it, requirements.
Thank you.
I don't have a, I mean, I don't think there is a one particular, policy just focusing on the renewable sector, but I would say that we would need more of the regulatory insights, to when the policymakers should have a sufficient understanding of the AI challenges in the renewable energy sector to be able to formulate a sound policy that impacts individuals as well as the environment. So there will be new, piloting procedures that may be required from the governments to proceed in this sector.
Thank you. Any more questions from the audience?
Yeah, maybe I have an extra question. So for the panelists, what is the best source of, do you have a website that you recommend, like a newsletter, like, to keep in touch with, like, maybe we want to keep in touch with AI and renewable energy, like, is there like a go-to? I mean, I like climate change AI is very good, but do you have any other like interesting sources if you want to keep in touch with research or applications in that field?
Yeah, so I think as the organizers, we developed one of the websites called AI4Renewables.org, which in which we hope to put together learning resources and information about open source datasets and whatever else. Hopefully it can be maintained in the future. We can have some community members join us in that initiative to come together and share whatever information they have available in this domain, and we can put together. I will put the link on the chat for that. But yeah, otherwise, if any of the panelists, are you aware of any such information repository resource which people can refer to?
Well, I think it's depend on what kind of resource you are looking for, right? If you're looking for wind resource data, I think the weather station are the best resource. If you are looking for some kind of a new technique or something, then I would prefer, what I would do is basically I go for the Google Scholar. I just use the keywords which I'm looking for. I search and the paper will come, and I'll go through some of the leading author and I will contact them through the email for the future activity. This is the way I work. But in case this is basically starting a new thinking kind of a thing. Apart from that, you can have some kind of what you call the leading organization who do the activities in the wind energy sector. So, for example, if you search in a Google like AI for wind energy leading organization, you'll find lots of the industries are there and leading people. And you can also use the LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a very great resource. They have a very filtration technique through which you can connect with all the people. And I think we have all here panelists and the members who joined. These are also can be useful for those things, activities to gather the information.
I would say in general, it's quite difficult because so much of it is sort of secret, sort of commercially sensitive research. Of course, you can keep in touch with the major journals, either sort of renewable energy, wind energy kind of journals, or more in the AI side, and just, as you said, do a search. But there are some conferences that sort of focus on this topic. Most of them pay for, unless you happen to get a speaking slot. Or you can go to the main sort of Wind Europe conferences and just wander around and see what people are doing.
Yeah.
That's how I tend to sort of keep in touch with people, but it just depends on who turns up and who you get to talk to. It's really difficult to summarize what's really being done.
Yeah. I think the Wind Aero conference and all those kind of activity are very good for making a new networks, and they're showcasing the various technologies. And if you have to start from the bottom, I think the best way, what I used to do is that go through the Google Scholar. But the thing is that they have open access. You know, you are not supposed to pay the subscription in order to read those papers. Many university and the UK, I think recently the UKRI published a one frame where they said that from April 6th, every researcher is supposed to be open access. And the funding body is going to, and there is a big fight going on between the UK government, EU, and with the elsewhere with the cost kind of arrangement. So this is, I think, in the recent coming month is going to be resolved. So in that respect, understanding the technological aspects through the paper is a good way. And then after interacting with the industry through the conference is also a very good way to make a network.
Right. Thank you for the responses, and thank you for the question, Min. Any more questions? We have got a couple of minutes left still for the social. So any more questions or anything related to exploring future collaborations in the industry or academia? Any thoughts, any views from the audience? Yeah, if not, I would say that Natalia, Alexandra, you have any views on how the audience can stay connected with this domain, and uh, I mean, how they can remain aware of what's happening in sustainability, and how to really use technology as a positive driving force to make a positive change in the society. So you would like to share some views?
Yeah, happy to. Just very quickly, the climate change AI, it was already mentioned here as a good source. Another source that I believe is quite good is just basically following the major conferences like ICLR, ICML, and NeurIPS conferences. They have specific workshops focusing on AI for good or AI for sustainability. Well, like with sometimes like smaller specific topics. Maybe you can find something about renewables. So that's all about my knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra. Your views on staying connected with organizations like UN and how they can help people remain motivated in using technology for positive change?
Sure. Well, with regards to the UN, there's always the local organizations, the UNA. If you would like to get involved there, you could even create a platform of your own to share knowledge in your community, and that way you can also gain access to a lot of processes that are more like hidden to the public that the UN are going through. So, for example, we have once a month we have a sustainability event that informs our members like on progresses that are happening in Sweden, but also internationally. But I would say on a personal level, I actually use newspapers, the old way of doing things, but also focusing on the science section. So I go into different types of sources. I sometimes use The Guardian, Al Jazeera, but then go into the science bit, and you can actually be surprised what information you can get from the proper media. So yeah, otherwise the sources that have been stated are pretty good. All right.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much for your views. And yeah, thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you to the panelists for your valuable time, your opinion, your views. And if the audience would like to ask any further questions, if they want to stay connected, you can always go to the AI4Renewables.org webpage, and yeah, connect with the panelists, connect with the organizers, and yeah, hopefully you can join together in this initiative on applying AI for the renewable energy transition. So thank you for joining us. And the second day of the social would be on 27th April, Wednesday, when we would also have an invited speaker from Climate Change AI, one of the organizations few of you mentioned. And yeah, hopefully we can get some more insider views on what the community is doing in the AI side of things. So thank you for joining us today. This video from this panel discussion would be put up on YouTube, so people from other parts of the world, from for example from the US, wherein it was like 4 a.m. or something like that when this took place, they can also watch it. So thank you and have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Bye.
Thank you so much.